guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So one thing I'm really fond of and interested in is when I see situations where life imitates art. So you know when you watch movies and there's like this journalist who's reporting on a crime case and then you find out that they're actually the murderer, so you see them being inside the situation and outside the situation. I like that. I think that's really interesting. Of course, I don't support murder, but it's interesting to see when it happens and kind of what leads to that happening. That being said, I'm going to stop being vague and just tell you the title of what we're doing today so we're on the same page. So I found this article that is titled 5 Crime Writers Who Turned Out to Be Actual Murderers, the Grisly Cases in Which Life Imitated Art or the Other Way Around. It is an article from Vice, so the quality is going to be what it is, but nonetheless I thought it was interesting to look through a few separate situations rather than just focus on one. And I especially liked it because it's focused on writers, and as you guys know, I have 2 degrees in English, so writing is a very big part of my life and has been for my entire life, actually. That being said, this video today is being sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with more than 30,000 classes in design, business, and more. One course that I've been particularly interested in is the Writer's Toolkit: 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit. Now, the interesting thing about this course is that it's not necessarily telling you how to write, but how to kind of get yourself in the right headspace to write, which has been a problem of mine. I feel like I might be inspired, but I have difficulty, especially with my depression getting in the way, to sit down and actually do the damn thing. So this course is especially useful for that. That's actually step 5 here, where you're taught how to stick to a routine and be productive. Premium memberships give you unlimited access so you can join the classes and communities that are just right for you. Whether you want to fuel your curiosity, creativity, or even career, Skillshare is the perfect place to keep you learning and thriving. Join more than 7 million creators learning with Skillshare. Join groups to learn with like-minded learners, give and receive feedback on projects, and speak with others with the same interests as you. Skillshare is giving away a free 2-month unlimited access trial to my subscribers who click the link in the description box, and after that, it's only around $10 per month. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Anyway, let's get into the video. To be noted, this article was posted a year ago in September of 2018, just so you know it's not brand new information. Earlier this month, 68-year-old Nancy Crampton Brophy, an Oregon novelist who wrote a book about a woman who, quote-unquote, spent every day of her marriage fantasizing about killing her husband, was arrested for, well, allegedly murdering her husband. In 2015, the gritty romance writer self-published a book called The Wrong Husband, about a woman who tries to escape her abusive husband by faking her own death. And in 2011, she penned an essay titled How to Murder Your Husband for a blog called See Jane Publish. As a romantic suspense writer, I spend a lot of time thinking about murder and consequently about police procedures, she opined. After all, if the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. Though Crampton Brophy's alleged murder is a particularly absurd case of life imitating art, it's not a totally uncommon occurrence. Here, we've collected the most gruesome and terrifying examples of what happens when crime writers turn their fiction into reality, sometimes echoing the content of their work. It's crazy to me when I think about this, because in a way it makes sense. A lot of the time when you write creative writing, there will be parts of it that are autobiographic. In my case, it's extremely autobiographic to the point where it's usually spot on, which is always funny because anytime I had a creative writing class, the character would be me. It would be me telling the story, but I wouldn't tell anyone that it was me, and it was funny because then people would be like, the main character's a bitch, and I'm like, I mean, they're not wrong, but still. Apologies in advance if I butcher names. I'm gonna do my best. Liu Yongbiao. In August 2017, Chinese writer Liu Yongbiao was working on a book when he was arrested for 4 cold case murders that happened more than 2 decades earlier. The book, called The Beautiful Writer Who Killed, was reportedly about a female writer who has killed many people, yet the cases remain unsolved. According to Chinese website Sixth Tone, Liu was arrested at his home home on Friday under suspicion that he and an accomplice were involved in a gruesome botched robbery back in 1995. Police believe that the two suspects, Liu, 53, and a man named Wang, 65, initially went to a hostel in the city of Huzhou to rob its guests, but ended up beating a man to death in the process, The Guardian reports. Then they allegedly killed the owners and their 13-year-old grandson to cover it up. Since then, the case has gone cold until new DNA evidence led police to Liu's door. When the officers apprehended him on Friday, he reported to them, "I've been waiting for you here all this time." Liu's second-to-last novel was titled The Guilty Secret. In a letter Liu reportedly wrote to his wife, where he confessed to his crimes, he said, "I lived in fear for 20 years. I knew the day would come. I can finally be free from the mental torment I've endured for so long." According to the Daily Mail, Liu was sentenced to death in July of 2018. Yikes. It genuinely made me shiver, and he's like, "I've been waiting for you this entire time." And while I completely understand writing autobiographic type creative writing, I just don't understand why people would give themselves away. And of course here it seems like he wanted to be caught because, like he said, there was this mental torment. It just stupefies me. Like, I know people do it all the time. I know people plenty of times post shit even online admitting to crimes they've committed, but it's so bizarre to me, the act of someone actually writing it down and recalling what they did if they already did it, or planning to do what they're writing. Either way, whether it's retroactive or a future plan, it creeps me out. It just seems unreal. So then we have Blake Leibel. In June of this year, writer Blake Leibel was sentenced to life in prison for torture and murder of his girlfriend Yana Kasian, whose body was drained of all her blood in a crime that a prosecutor said mirrored the script of a graphic novel he co-wrote, per CBS Los Angeles. That got really intense really fast. Of course, any murder is obviously terrible, goes without saying, but the whole body being drained of blood is, yeah, I just got goosebumps thinking about that. That is horrifying. Part of what also frustrates me about these crimes is that, you know how there's the whole narrative of like video games make you violent, meh. I feel like there's also a different narrative, and we've seen this with a couple of true crime cases I've talked about, where someone will be interested in horror or something that, let's say, is dark in nature, and then it'll be turned into, oh, because they were interested in this, they ended up doing that. Obviously, not every person that's interested in horror or dark topics is gonna be a killer, but you know how the media is. They take one example and then conflate everyone in the community with that one example, which is, needless to say, inaccurate. Beth Silverman, the prosecuting attorney, called Leibel's brutal torture and murder of Kasian in 2016 a case of life imitating art, noting that his 2015 graphic novel, Syndrome, had depictions of bloodletting. The cover of the book also depicts an image of a baby doll being scalped, which resembles body parts found at the crime scene. Yeah, so far, this guy Leibel, I'm sorry if I'm butchering his last name, is one of the ones that has creeped me out the most. Maybe because we have all this extra detail on what happened, which is just horrifying. The graphic, pardon the pun, the graphic nature of what he did, I think, is what makes it a lot more jarring, because, like I said, the prior ones, we don't have all that much detail on the actual crime scene and how the murder was executed. Then we have Richard Klinkhamer. God, everyone here has such complicated last names. In 1992, after the wife of Dutch crime writer Richard Klinkhamer disappeared, the author gave his publisher a manuscript novel that, according to The Guardian, was a grisly, detailed exploration of 7 ways in which Klinkhamer could conceivably have killed his wife, Hannelore. In one of the scenarios set out in the book, he disposes of her body by pushing her flesh through a mincer and feeding it to the pigeons. See, now, as much as writing creatively like a story of something that happened to you, like I said, isn't strange, I definitely feel very alarmed by the fact that he didn't tell one story. He gave 7 different options of how he could have conceivably killed her. That is extremely alarming to me. The whole thing of pushing her flesh through a mincer and feeding it to pigeons is actual nightmare fuel for me. Although Klinkhamer was an immediate suspect and the police inquiry into his wife's disappearance, they couldn't proceed with their investigation because they didn't have a body. After the Dutch crime writer's grisly and seemingly autobiographical manuscript was rejected by his publisher for being too gruesome, excerpts began popping up in the Dutch underground press. He then became a sort of literary celebrity, appearing as a guest on various TV shows. After he moved to Amsterdam, a family moved into the house Klinkhamer formerly shared with his wife. While making home renovations, they hired a digger who found a skull buried beneath the concrete floor of a backyard shed, which belonged to Klinkhamer's wife, Hannelore. In 2000, police finally arrested Klinkhamer for the murder, and he confessed. Since they mentioned that he gave 7 ways in which he could have killed his wife, I'm now wondering which way he chose. And, I mean, maybe it's the mincer one, but I kind of tend to think they mentioned that one specifically because it's so gruesome. But aside from that, it's also concerning that someone would sit down and come up with 7 conceivable ways that they could kill their significant other. That just makes me feel like someone spent God knows how much time just researching and thinking about how could I do this, how could I get away with it. And the crazy thing is that had he not written that, I'm not saying he would have gotten away with it, because if someone else bought the house and they did the renovations and they found the skull, you know, he still would have been a suspect. But at the same time, I feel like that manuscript adds so much more kind of understanding on our part into the case and into what he maybe might have done to kill his wife. So next up we have Krystian Bala. Novelist Krystian Bala might have gotten away with murdering a Polish businessman in 2000, but 3 years later he published Amok, which told the story of a Polish intellectual named Chris, the English version of Christian, who murders a female lover for no reason and conceals the act so well that he is never caught. In Amok, the description of the woman's murder, bound with her hands behind her back with a cord that's also looped into a noose around her neck, was eerily similar to a murder case that left investigators stumped a few years earlier. In 2000, cops found the body of Dariusz Januszewski in a river after having been starved and tortured. He was also tied up. Part of the rope, which appeared to have been cut with a knife, had once connected his hands to his neck, binding the man in a backward cradle, an excruciating position. The slightest wiggle would have caused the noose to tighten further, David Gann wrote in The New Yorker. Jacek Wróblewski took over the case in 2003. He traced a suspicious call made to the victim's office right before the murder to a cell phone purchased by Krystian Bala, which the author later sold on eBay. Wróblewski began researching Bala and read Amok. Per The New Yorker, he was struck in particular by the killer's method. I tightened the noose around her neck. The book couldn't be used as evidence, but it led Wróblewski to other clues, and eventually Bala was sentenced to 25 years in prison for his role in the murder. During his hearing, the judge noted there are certain shared characteristics between the book's narrator and the author. The more I read these, the more I just wonder how much these authors wrote these things because they're authors and it's, you know, in a way innate to write about your own life, versus them writing about this so then they'd kind of get caught, you know, to kind of get the fucked up to say, but credit for what they did. In each case, I wonder which one it is, and I think it's probably a mixture of both, but it seems like a lot of these people want to be acknowledged for what they did, which is alarming, yet in a way understandable, because a lot of the times we see that when people don't get caught, they slowly disseminate clues. Anne Perry. Before Anne Perry became a best-selling crime novelist, she spent 5 years in prison for the murder of her best friend's mom. Born Juliet Hulme, the 15-year-old was found guilty of bludgeoning Honora Parker to death, along with a woman's 16-year-old daughter, Pauline Parker. The bloody crime occurred in 1954 after Hulme's parents told her they were getting a divorce and shipping her off to South Africa to live with her aunt. Having developed a close bond with Parker, Hulme thought they could leave New Zealand together, but Parker's mother, Honora, refused. Her refusal triggered Parker's murderous rage, and Hulme believed she owed it to her friend to help lure Mrs. Parker to a Christchurch park and cosh her with a brick in a stocking, The Guardian reports. After her release, Hulme moved to Scotland and reinvented herself as a crime novelist, changing her name to Anne Perry and going on to publish roughly 40 books. Her true identity was only outed in 1994 after Peter Jackson made Heavenly Creatures, a film based on the real-life event. According to a 60 Minutes interview from 2012, Perry believes she paid her debt to society by saying, "One needs to pay when you're in the wrong. Then you can leave it behind you. It's not a terrible thing, it's a good thing, it's a healing thing to pay and then leave it behind you." So in one way, I agree, it's a good thing to pay for what you did, though I don't know if I would consider 5 years necessarily an appropriate payment for 2 separate murders. Like, I understand she was a minor, so that affects things. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would agree that when you murder someone, you might pay your debt by being in jail for a certain amount of time, but I don't think you're ever cleared of that compared to other crimes like non-violent crimes like drug dealing and stuff like that. I don't know if you can ever really move on from something like that. She, as the murderer, might have, but the way people look at you, especially when it's such a violent murder at such a young age of two people, not in self-defense, in terms of the context, I don't know how much other people would be able to move on from that. Anyways, guys, I hope that this was interesting. I know it's a little bit different from the normal way we cover true crime cases here, but I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about the debt to society being paid, and if you think Ann Perry did pay it, and also which one of these cases creeped you out the most. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the